Alrighty, to take a look at the last section, Unit 5 and Unit 6 from these 50 essential questions. Here we're looking at the factor market and the labor market. Explain how more occupational licensing will affect wages in the labor market. If we're looking at the supply and the demand for labor, we're looking at the wages and the quantity. Alright, if we're adding these new licensing that you need for a job, it makes it more difficult to supply those workers. The supply of labor drops, in which case that would lead to higher wages, so wages go up, and a lower quantity of labor, so quantity goes down for this. Explain how minimum wage affects the quantity demanded and quantity supplied of labor. All right, so we've got our supply, we've got our demand for labor, we've got our wage and the quantity. So if we set a minimum wage, a binding minimum wage, to say, it'll need to be above equilibrium. So I'm going to put minimum wage there. Now, if that wage is higher than equilibrium, the quantity supplied should go up. More people are willing to work at the higher wage. The quantity demanded would go down because fewer businesses are willing to hire at that higher wage. Explain why the marginal revenue product for workers is equal to the demand for workers. Because high wages means low quantity demanded, and vice versa. If their wages are lower, businesses are willing to hire more workers. So it makes that demand curve. And also, if we're looking at the marginal revenue product, it looks the opposite of our marginal cost, right? Sorry. If that helps. Right, so as I hire more workers, each additional worker is making me more money. But after I hire too many workers, that marginal revenue product starts to go down, the diminishing returns. So I'm willing to pay those early workers more, the later workers less. Explain why the marginal resource costs for a perfectly competitive firm is horizontal. It's because every person is getting paid the same amount. So we've got the market supply and demand for labor, wages and quantity. All right, let's call this $15 an hour. So if I'm hiring in this market, like let's say dishwashers, if there's 100 dishwashers in town and they're all making $15 an hour, then whenever I hire them, I'm going to be taking that wage as well. So I'm going to be paying them $15 an hour as well. I'm not willing to pay them more because there's other people who will do it for less. I'm not able to pay them less because there's other businesses that will pay them more. So the supply of labor is completely elastic or completely horizontal in a perfectly competitive labor market. Explain why the least cost rule maximizes the total output when using two different resources. It's because the last dollar spent is always used most productively. That way we're not overusing or underusing any resources. So if I had one farmer and 10 tractors, then obviously I need more farmers and fewer tractors, right? That ninth, that 10th tractor isn't going to do me a whole lot of good if I don't have anybody to drive it. So what we're looking at is the marginal product per dollar of one good to equal the marginal product per dollar of the other good, right? That ninth and 10th tractor are just going to be sitting there. They're not going to be making me any additional units. So by hiring more farmers, my marginal product will go up. By getting rid of those tractors, same thing. Those most recent tractors are doing less for me. Sorry, as I hire more farmers, that marginal product is going to go down until it meets the marginal product of the tractors. All right, and then finally, Unit 6. Oh, sorry, we'll explain the difference between a monopsony and a monopoly. A monopsony is looking at the factor market. Monopoly is looking at the product market. So Georgia Power would have a monopoly on electricity, right? We're buying electricity as a finished good. A monopsony is a business that is the sole provider of jobs in an area, right? So we talked about, how Amazon will build their factories in the middle of nowhere because they know that these small towns are really reliant on them. So a business that gives them a lot more control over their wages. Because the workers don't really have a lot of other options. All right, explain why negative externalities generate dead weight loss. It's because, I'm just going to shorten it to profit maximizing point, PMP. It just reflects the private benefits and the private costs. And not the public good. So if we look at pollution as an example here, right, if Ford has to put catalytic converters on their cars to reduce pollution, they're taking on this private cost. But if they don't do it, the pollution that comes out of it, they don't really have to deal with, right? So that's a public problem and not a private problem. So these negative externalities is when there's negative side effects that other people or that society is facing, and it creates dead weight loss because now we're producing at the profit maximizing point, but the socially optimal point would be less than that, right? We want fewer smokers because I don't want people smoking around my daughter. So there's the private cost of smoking, but there's the public cost of smoking as well. Explain why a per unit tax on a negative externality does not generate dead weight loss. It's because we want to produce less of that good, right? So if we're looking at the supply or the marginal social benefits and the marginal social cost. Sorry, give me 1 second to get the right graph for this. We don't need a graph now. Because we want to produce less of this negative externality, that tax is going to reduce the cost. So we've got the marginal social cost, the marginal social benefit, right, and our marginal private cost. All right, so what we see is that currently, if we're producing right here, we're overproducing compared to what society wants. If we tax this good, that raises the cost up to the social level, and it gets rid of that dead weight loss. And explain why positive externalities generate dead weight loss. A positive externality is when we're underproducing something. So we've got the marginal private cost, marginal private benefit. All right, so if we look at vaccines as a good example here, right? There's a social benefit to vaccines as well, that you getting your vaccines helps me because I'm less likely to catch whatever disease you could have gotten. So we've got our dead weight loss here because we're underproducing compared to what society wants. So that's why the government subsidizes these goods, and that's why it doesn't cost you anything to get a vaccine, to encourage you to do it. So private goods owned by individuals for individuals. Public goods are for everybody. For public goods to work, they need to be non-exclusive and non-competitive. What that means is that, for like the library, for instance, it's not exclusive in that anybody in Glenn County can use it, and it's not competitive in that me using the library doesn't stop you from using the library. If you're looking at the park, right, anybody can use the park. Me using the park doesn't exclude you from using the park. It's for everybody, by everybody. The purpose of antitrust policies is to prevent monopolies. If you look at Standard Oil as a good example here, these antitrust policies broke up Rockefeller's Standard Oil into like 12 or 13 different smaller oil and gas companies. That way they're more competitive. You see the government doing this with Disney right now, breaking up parts of that company because they're getting too much control. Explain why a lump sum tax does not change output in the short run. It's because the lump sum tax doesn't change marginal cost, right? It just changes the average total cost. If I'm looking at producing, right, we've got my marginal cost and my marginal revenue here and my average total cost. So I'm going to produce at Mr. Mac right here, where marginal revenue and marginal cost meet. If we raise this lump sum tax, my average total cost goes up, but I'm still producing at the same amount there. I'm still producing at Mr. Mac. I'm just making less of a profit. So the lump sum taxes don't change marginal cost. Per unit taxes do. Explain the difference between a progressive and a regressive tax. A progressive tax, as income goes up, your tax rate goes up as well. So if we look at our income tax, my income tax rate would be 20%. Your income tax rate, if you have a job, is probably about 10%. So because I make more money, I'm taxed more heavily. If your income goes down, then you're taxed less heavily. A regressive tax, though, hurts lower income people more. And if you look at an example of this with sales tax, right? So if my wife and I together are able to make $100,000, let's say that we're able to save half of that and we spend the other half of it, right? Well, only 50% of our income is going to be affected by that sales tax. But let's say that you only make $10,000. Chances are you're going to have to spend every penny of that on rent and food and medicine or whatever. So all of your income is going to be affected by that sales tax then. So a regressive tax is one that hurts lower income people more. All right, that's our 50 essential questions. See you guys later.